Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife decided to have a drink with her lover, not realizing that her husband would return early, but later the inevitable happened. And this is just one except from our story today, and we have 3 of them today. Enjoy watching. A light rain began. On that day, I somehow missed checking the weather forecast, but at 44, my niece could sometimes sense when the elements were about to reveal their nasty side. Towards evening, my joints started to ache noticeably, and then they twisted so much that I even took the time to roll up my pants and apply a special ointment. I already knew that the rain wouldn't stop anytime soon, and it was time for us to wrap up our work. Our construction crew had just finished digging the pit for a large building, only some cleaning remained in one corner. However, the equipment broke down, and a few people had to climb onto supports to finish the work manually. They soon completed it, but as they were making their way back, one of the workers slipped and slid down the slippery mud slope. Fortunately, he didn't break anything, but I wanted to relieve him of work for the day since he did get a few minor bruises. Moreover, due to the weather, I had already decided to stop the work. At that time, the main developer arrived at the site, accompanied by the mayor of our small town. They noticed that people were slowly gathering, and the developer Chuck immediately displayed his usual displeased expression. "Why is everyone leaving? There are still about 3 hours left until the end of the workday. And the work needs to be completed on time. All supports must be set up today," he said with some anger in his voice. "But the weather has worsened. The rain is making the work too complicated. Someone might get hurt," I replied. "I'm not paying you to watch the weather. You need to finish on time," he told me, then shouted to the entire crew, "Hey, all of you. Come on, continue. I'll add a bonus to the pay if you manage to set up all the supports today." Our town was small, and job opportunities were not plentiful, so many men agreed to any work. Involuntarily, many from the crew started sliding back to their workplaces. By that time, the rain had intensified. I couldn't stand such treatment, so I addressed the mayor, who had been standing under his huge black umbrella, hiding his half-bald head. "Say something. You're the mayor. These people voted for you, and you allow them to be treated like this?" "Oh, come on, John, why are you so worked up? It's just a little rain. What harm can it do? They'll do the job and then go home." I didn't like their attitude towards the workers, but they were high-ranking officials, and their orders had more power than mine. Moreover, the money they promised the workers also had a peculiar authority over their compliance. However, I was appointed the foreman, and I was responsible for them. I couldn't just watch as they strained to do the work, risking their lives. While the crew continued working, and I tried to persuade the higher-ups to stop everything, the weather got even worse. A strong wind rose, and the rain turned into a downpour. The big shots immediately headed to their cars to take cover and leave. Still, I went against them and started shouting for everyone to go home. By the time we finished gathering, a strong hurricane had begun, and the wind was tossing lighter objects in different directions. Some people got injured, and others, helping them, loaded them into their cars to take them to the city hospital. I, too, didn't stay on the sidelines and, taking one of the workers with a broken leg by the arm, dragged him to my pickup. "Hey, how are you holding up?" I asked the poor guy as we drove, but visibility was very poor, even though the windshield wipers were working at full capacity, and I tried not to take my eyes off the road. "We should have listened to you. But you know how everyone needs money." Yes, these idiots sometimes use their position to maintain control and keep the workers in submission. Mostly, I noticed that Chuck was the one giving the commands. He had come to our town a few years ago and decided to run his business here. Mayor Stuart Drake, who turned out to be some distant relative of his, actively supported him, even if it meant bypassing some safety regulations. Chuck had already built a fairly large supermarket in the town, and many residents were pleased with it. Besides the vast product selection, additional job opportunities were created. Now he wanted to build a factory outside the town for manufacturing various woolen products. Our town was surrounded by farms whose owners kept sheep and goats, and Chuck thought such a factory would be fitting. One of those farms belonged to my parents. But let's go back to the day of the hurricane. My car was almost at the town limits when a tree unexpectedly fell right in front of us. I barely managed to brake in time to avoid a collision. But now we needed to find another way. Going back to take a detour from the previous intersection was too far. I decided it would be faster to walk to the nearest house and then ask someone for a ride. That's what I did. Clark groaned in pain the whole way, but he tried to hold on and hopped on one leg, holding onto me. The streets of the suburbs were deserted, not a single car in sight. The first house we came across belonged to an old lady. But she certainly didn't have a car. I hoped, however, that I could put the injured man in her house and call the hospital from her. Mrs. Rosemallon recognized me immediately. I had fixed her porch roof once. Not for money, she needed help, and I had free time, so I couldn't refuse to assist the old lady. She promptly offered us her couch and hurried to the kitchen to make us some hot tea. Meanwhile, I called the hospital, but they informed me that all their vehicles were currently occupied, and transportation was problematic due to the weather. So, I dialed my friend's number, hoping he wasn't busy and could help, especially since he lived not far from Mrs. Rosemallon's house. "How are you, John?" she asked me, placing the tray with cups on the table when I finished the phone call. Same old, same old. Lucy is still waiting for when we'll have grandchildren. Mrs. Rosemallon, my friend needs help. Do you have any sticks to immobilize his leg? He's been injured for quite some time. We need to make a splint. Take that chair over there, she pointed to an old chair near the fireplace. It's just sitting there doing nothing. And go look for bandages in the bathroom. I immediately broke a leg off the chair, choosing the most suitable one, and soon Clark's leg was bandaged. But I still couldn't stop worrying because Edward was delayed, and in the meantime, I couldn't reach my wife at home. I even called her workplace, but they told me she had already left, and I worried about her getting home. Heard your wife is working at the mayor's office now, the old lady continued the conversation. Yes. You could say she got lucky. But her position isn't that high to boast about. She mostly deals with paperwork there. It's not a good place, John. I know you and Lucy. And now that she's there with those people, it's not good. Oh, Mrs. Rosemallon, you and your prophetic things again? What could happen there? Almost everyone there is like family. I have to meet with the mayor myself sometimes. You're right that he's not very pleasant, but what can he do to my wife? The old lady tried to persuade me to make Lucy quit her job, but as I saw the headlights approaching, I realized Edward was coming. Then he knocked on the door. I sincerely thanked the old lady for her help and shelter, and my friend and I left to take the injured man to the hospital. My house was on the way to the hospital, so I asked Edward to continue the journey alone. I stepped out near the house, wanting to make sure everything was fine with my wife. From a distance, I noticed that a piece of the huge sign that used to be installed opposite our house near the road had been blown off by the wind and was now propping the door. Light was visible in some windows, and I hoped Lucy was already home. As I approached, the wind almost knocked me over, but soon I was at the window and decided to break the glass to get inside. As I climbed in, I heard her scream in fear, and then I saw Chuck in front of me, holding my bat, apparently preparing to fend off unwanted guests. "Why is he here?" was the first thing I asked my wife. "I'm came to talk." "But as you can see, the door is jammed, and I couldn't get out," Chuck replied arrogantly. "I'm not asking you," I said boldly. "But I'm the one talking," Chuck continued with a condescending tone. "Don't forget that thanks to me, many people have jobs. Both for you and for this society girl. I'm the one who helped her get a position where she warms her 5th place now." "Hey, you! How dare you talk about my wife like that?" I noticed that Chuck had already had a good amount to drink. "Lucy, why are you still not in the basement? And what about the phone?" "I couldn't get through. The wire must have broken. Phone doesn't work, and the battery on my cell phone is dead," replied my wife. At that moment, another window shattered, hit by a falling branch. I didn't want to deal with Chuck right now. My main concern was my wife's safety. I ordered that we should immediately go down to the basement and wait there until the storm passed. I didn't expect a thank you from Chuck, knowing his nasty character, but during a disaster, everyone had the right to help and a place in a shelter. While we waited for the storm to end, Lucy told me that as soon as it all started, all employees were sent home. but her car had some malfunction, and it wouldn't start. At that moment, Chuck happened to be nearby and kindly offered to give her a ride. Once at home, he decided to wait for me to discuss some work details and generously helped himself to my bar in the living room. During the time I talked with my wife, Chuck found the shelf with our wine collection and had already finished a bottle. He wasn't strong with alcohol and quickly got drunk. He no longer cared that his expensive coat was now covered in dust and dirt, especially after stumbling several times and falling to the floor. I found his behavior amusing when he began examining the patterns of old plaster on the wall with interest. I turned on the camera on my phone and placed it on the shelf to capture this moment. My wife was searching for flashlights and other items on the shelves and didn't see what I did. I didn't know why I needed it. I just thought that the next day or when he started giving absurd orders again, I could show him how businesslike he really was. Chuck didn't notice that he was being watched camera, and he continued his whimsical actions. I approached him and decided to tease him a bit, so that his occasionally incoherent speech would also be recorded. "Say, Chuck, you are indeed a great man. You've done so much good for the town and its residents," I approached him, pretending to brush dust off his shoulder. "Yes, I am." He turned to me. "I'm like a god around here. If it wasn't for me, you'd all still be living in the Stone Age. But I've given you jobs, given you opportunities, and lots of things." He turned to the shelf again and pulled out another bottle. "You don't mind, do you?" he asked me, showing me the bottle of wine. "No. Help yourself. You need it more right now." He deftly popped the cork and sucked on the neck and began to sip the wine, not even trying to do it neatly, and some of it just flowed past his mouth and down his pig snout. When he had taken a few sips, he decided to continue his speech, in which he praised himself, but at the same time his words were filled with contempt for the rest of the people, especially when he said that many of the people here were just untalented sheep, and without his intervention, would have continued to pluck grass to feed their families. He walked around the cellar with a peacock's gait, belly out, and soon found himself next to my wife. "Oh, here's another little sheep I helped. Sabi, come on, Sabi." With one hand holding the bottle, he grabbed her shoulders, and with the other, he grabbed her chest. I considered this audacity and immediately rushed towards him. "Hey, what do you think you're doing, you idiot?" I grabbed him by the collar, pulled him away from my wife, and threw him to the side. It didn't take much effort since he wasn't standing very steadily on his feet, and he rolled across the floor like a tumbleweed, stopping only when he reached a support. At first, he grumbled a bit, apparently realizing what had happened, then he got up and started talking again, staring at me. "Hey, what's your problem?" he asked me, then looked at my wife. "What's wrong with you? Why are you embarrassed? You liked it." Then he noticed my puzzled and angry face. "Oh, so I see you don't know how she got her sweet spot. What, did you think she was smart? All that talentless girl can do is bake cupcakes. But she's so beautiful." He began to smirk. "What is he talking about?" I asked my wife. "He's just drunk. Why are you listening to him?" "Shut up, Chuck. What are you doing?" Lucy yelled. "Oh, the little sheep speaks. Yes, John. You know, I even envy you. She knows how to do it sometimes." Then I understood what he was talking about and realized that Lucy got the job thanks to agreeing to sleep with this scumbag. Earlier, she worked as a teacher in the local elementary school, but then there were layoffs, and she lost her job. For a while, she stayed at home since she didn't have other qualifications or talents, to be honest. Initially, I was even surprised at how she managed to get a job in an office. Lucy told me that there wasn't much to do there, just sorting documents and occasionally filling out necessary forms. Now I understood that she had been deceiving me, and even when the truth came out, she continued to deny everything, which infuriated me even more. Overflowing with anger from what I had learned, I couldn't react calmly to the situation. First, I lunged at that scumbag who continued to smirk, and I wanted to wipe that smirk off his face. Approaching him, I grabbed him by the collar, lifted him slightly, and immediately punched his fat face. "What did you say, idiot? Say it again." "Yes, your wife is just a society girl." I hit him in the face again, and then several more times. His admission struck me in the heart, and I felt only pain, disappointment, and rage. I wanted to keep hitting him, not only for taking advantage of my wife, but for all the time he behaved like this with other people. Now, at last, I could unleash myself fully. I had wanted to punch him for a long time, and now there was an opportunity. When he hung limp in my grip, almost powerless, I pushed him to the floor, and standing up, I kicked him in the stomach with my foot. Then I turned to my wife, who stood there watching in horror. "So, is it true? I mean, why would he lie? Did you really sleep with that piece of shit?" I approached her, grabbed her delicate throat, which I could crush in an instant. Lucy's cheeks were instantly wet with large tears, and she made a sound in fear as best she could. What she feared at that moment, whether it was that I had discovered the whole truth about her or for her life, I could only guess. Yes, I could strangle both her and him in that basement, blaming it all on an unfortunate accident, toppling a beam onto them. At some point, I even felt like I wanted to do that. But I didn't. Even though it hurt terribly at that moment, I wasn't a crazed murderer. I looked at Lucy, and before me now stood a woman who was a stranger to me. A woman with whom I had lived for just over 20 years, whom I had loved all these years, and I had no idea she could do this to me, all for a lousy office chair. Overwhelmed by a surge of pain, I swung and gave her a strong slap, causing her to lose her balance and fall to the floor, hitting her back against the edge of a shelf. For a moment, I even thought that my blow had been too strong, and I might have killed her because she didn't move for a few moments. But then she turned her head and weakly groaned. I turned away and headed to the wine shelf. Taking one, I took a few sips myself. Perhaps at that moment, I thought alcohol would help numb my pain a bit. But it didn't happen. Chuck's words continued to echo in my ears in an endless loop, and everything around me seemed to spin. I started making my way to the exit. I wanted to get away from this madness and these traitors. I understood that the storm was still raging outside, but at that moment, I didn't care. Lucy screamed after me not to go anywhere and to stay safe. But at that moment, it seemed to me that I would only find peace when I was far away from all of this. When I exited the basement and reached the door, I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. At that moment, I completely forgot that it was blocked from the outside, and I went to the window through which I had entered the house recently. I wanted to be in the rain. It was as if I hoped it could wash away all this pain and disappointment. But when I got outside, I realized that the storm had almost subsided, and in the distance, you could even see the clouds thinning. Still, I didn't want to go back into the house. Then I remembered that I had recently helped a worker and decided to go to the hospital to check on him and see how things were. Arriving at the hospital, I saw that there were quite a few injured people. I approached the nursing station and asked where I could find Clark Benjamin. Soon I was in his room, which had several beds. Besides him, I noticed that Edward was there too, with a bandaged leg. I was surprised, and after quickly greeting Clark, I went to my friend. "Why are you lying here?" I asked him. "Oh, just decided to take a break," he jokingly replied. Then he noticed my gloomy mood. "Why so grim? What happened with your wife?" "Just had an argument with Chuck," I replied, not wanting to admit that my wife had cheated on me for a job. "Yeah, that guy. I had a run-in with him recently. But for me, it's easier. I don't work for him. What happened to you?" Imagine this fat goat was hitting on my wife. You know what she looks like, quite a piece. So he even promised her some high position just for jumping into bed with him. And then? What else? She gave him a slap, and then she complained to me. I rushed to his office the same day, and I swear, he would be lying here now, but there were a few of his guys who stopped me, although I managed to hit him a couple of times. And then it dawned on me that my wife wasn't just a traitor, she didn't even attempt to resist that scumbag. Was she really that bad with me? I never said a bad word to her about she staying at home. On the contrary, I even liked it. She was less busy, more rested, and I loved her and wanted her to feel good about herself. Why did she do that to me? Listen, do you still have connections at the local TV station? An idea suddenly popped into my head. Yes. Why? I have a little plan on how to embellish the reputation of that scumbag, I said, starting to rummage through my pockets. Then I remembered that my phone was left in the basement. Looks like I'll have to wait a bit. I'll run an errand now, and then we'll discuss it. Don't go anywhere. Sure thing. I was just planning to jog around, he smirked. I headed towards the exit, briefly stopping by Clark to inquire about his well-being. Then I went home. The journey took some time as I had to walk, although I took shortcuts in some places. Soon, I arrived at the house. The thought that these two were still there, and I would have to see them again, was haunting me. But I needed my phone, so I headed to the basement. When I descended, I found no one there. I didn't bother wondering where everyone had gone and just went to look for my gadget, hoping it was still in place and hadn't been discovered. The phone was there, but by the time I picked it up, the battery had completely drained. I had to fiddle with it a bit to get it charged and wait for some time. When everything was ready, I decided to double-check the recording just in case. I fast-forwarded through the time I was there, and watching Chuck's movements, I even found it amusing at times. But then I noticed that the recording continued for some time, so I decided to watch until the end. When I left, Lucy began to regain consciousness, then she crawled up to Chuck. She tried to bring him to his senses, but he was still intoxicated, and there were also consequences from my blows. Then she took a bottle of water from the shelf and poured it on his face. Chuck began to come to his senses. She scolded him first for telling me about them, and then suggested talking to the mayor and possibly hiring more workers to finish construction faster. Chuck agreed, adding that after everything, I might sabotage, and then the construction would stop, and everyone could lose a significant amount of money. I became curious about what they were talking about. Could there really be some kind of conspiracy behind this construction? But what could be so special about it? Also, listening to Lucy's speech, I realized that she wasn't as talentless as I had thought, and if there was any affair between Chuck and the mayor, she was somehow involved in it too. I wanted to watch further, but as soon as they continued their conversation, the recording abruptly ended. Apparently, the phone's battery died at that moment. But I wasn't going to leave it at that. With this recording, I went to my friend, hoping for his support and assistance in exposing some conspiracy. At that moment, I even stopped thinking about my wife cheating on me, only remembering it when I noticed a billboard, miraculously not torn by the wind, where a happy couple stood in front of their new house, holding a little child. This silly advertisement made me remember the pain my wife had caused me. Returning to the hospital, I immediately went to Edward. But I didn't want to talk to him in the ward, so no one overheard our conversation, and he agreed to hobble with me to the courtyard, where he planned to have a smoke as well. I showed him the video and asked him to pay special attention to the end of the recording where Chuck talks to my wife. "You're quite something," Edward said when he finished watching up to the point where I dealt with Chuck. And then he watched until the end, even rewatching the conclusion. His face became thoughtful, as if he had just formulated some ideas of his own. I was eager to know his opinion and whether anything could be done about it. "It's obvious that something is wrong with the construction," I said. But I was there practically all the time, and I didn't notice anything strange. The only thing I can say is that Chuck was constantly pushing us, and when I asked him where he got this or that material, he brushed it off and claimed everything was fine. My friend, you've given me a puzzle," Edward said. "But you're right. There's definitely some manipulation going on here." He turned to me. "Can I take this recording? I have a friend, and his brother works for the FBI. I think I can get this matter into the right hands." "The FBI? Isn't the police enough?" I asked, surprised. "The police? Are you serious? If the mayor himself is involved, do you think the police can do anything to him? I bet they're all under his thumb. Underneath it and under Chuck." I agreed with my friend and sent a copy of the recording to his phone. But it would take some time for things to progress, and for now, I had no choice but to return home. Putting in some effort, I moved the stand that was blocking the door, as it needed to be removed anyway. When I entered, I noticed that Lucy was already at home. She sat with a sad face, and when she saw me, she rushed to me in tears, begging me to forgive her for the terrible mistake she had made, and that she now deeply regretted it. "Leave, fool. Couldn't you at least have the intelligence to tell me about it as soon as he suggested it to you? You weren't happy sitting at home?" but you worked so hard for this job so we could afford everything. I hardly saw you lately. I just wanted an additional income for our family, and they pay well there. Fool, I slapped her again, but not as hard this time, just so she could realize how deeply she had hurt me. You're like a brainless chicken running after a shiny piece. I tried for you. Did everything to make you happy, to make sure you lacked nothing. John. I waved her away and went to inspect what had become of our house while the elements raged. Fortunately, the house itself didn't suffer much, just a few broken windows, and I started boarding them up to prevent any animals or thugs from getting in at night. I didn't tell my wife about what I had learned because she might inform Chuck and the mayor, making it much harder to expose them. I had to wait a couple of days for any news from Edward. I even called him a few times and visited him at the hospital. He said that they were already dealing with it and that Chuck wasn't as simple as he seemed. The only thing that bothered me was that all the investigators would see how brutally I beat Chuck. However, Edward assured me that I likely wouldn't face any consequences, probably the opposite. I continued to go to work as well. The maintenance service made sure to clear the roads, and I could sit behind the wheel of my car again. But now, I deliberately delayed the construction, creating various malfunctions. I also kept an eye on all the workers, especially when Chuck visited the construction site. Surprisingly, during all this time, he never mentioned what happened in my basement, only tried to talk to me as briefly as possible and avoided any other topics. I assumed he would fire me after all, but for some reason, he didn't. Perhaps he was afraid I would expose his affair with my wife. But I didn't want to find out and simply waited for the moment when Edward would give me some good news. As for my wife, I tried to communicate with her as little as possible. I wanted to kick her out of the house so that she would fend for herself. But where could she go? She had no one here. Her parents had long passed away, and she had no brothers or sisters. Of course, she could turn to Chuck, but as far as I heard, he already had some sort of partner, even though they were not officially married. Moreover, I thought it was better to keep one of the participants in this scheme close. She continued to go to work as well, even though I thought she would leave after everything that happened. But apparently, she really worked there for a reason. And finally, the long-awaited moment arrived when Edward called me. It was in the evening, after I had returned from work, and he asked me to turn on the news. I followed his advice and quickly found myself in front of the television. The news anchor was reporting that a certain Chuck Valentine had been arrested for construction fraud. During the investigation, several safety protocol violations were discovered, and the materials he used were of poor quality, containing toxic substances that could pose health risks over time. Along with that, they showed the arrest of the mayor, whose involvement in Chuck's schemes had also been proven, and he had profited significantly from covering up all the shortcomings. I was elated to hear this news, realizing that turning to my friend and providing him with the recording wasn't in vain. At that moment, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, I saw several police officers and 2 men in office suits. They identified themselves as FBI agents and asked for permission to enter. For a moment, I thought they were here for me, considering the clear evidence on the recording of me venting my anger on Chuck. However, they inquired about my wife and explained that they had come for her as she was indeed involved. Chuck didn't make her a secretary for nothing. He and the mayor quickly educated her, and she falsified some reports, hiding the real documents that could expose the mayor's deception. In return, she was promised a decent reward. I informed them that she was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. When the agents went there, one of them returned, saying that she had escaped through the window. Several police officers immediately scattered in different directions to catch her. They didn't have to chase her for long. They brought her back to the patrol car in handcuffs when I asked them to talk to her. Lucy kept yelling that it wasn't her fault, that she'd been forced to do all this. But no one believed her, especially me. She begged me to help her, but I only told her that it was her own fault for what had happened to her. Of course I was sorry that my wife was going to jail, because deep down I still loved her. But I was hurt that she had betrayed me, and not only me, but our whole town. That was our first story in this video. Let's listen to our next story, which will be no less interesting. I'm a 35-year-old guy, and I've been married to Ellie, who's 34, for 5 years. We're just an ordinary couple who work during the week and like to unwind on the weekends, but things have been changing over the past 3 months. One Sunday, while we were relaxing together, Ellie surprised me by showing me pictures of her friends and asking me to rate them. I was a bit shocked at first, but she said it was all in good fun, so I went along with it. I made it clear that I didn't mean anything by it, and she reassured me. During the game, I ended up giving the highest rating to her friend Lily, who's 33. Lily used to be Ellie's gym partner before they became friends, and we've all hung out together. Then, out of nowhere, Ellie asked me if I would sleep with Lily if I had the chance. I was taken aback and reminded her that I had said it was all just for fun. I know how things can get blown out of proportion sometimes. Ellie assured me she wasn't jealous and said that if I found Lily attractive, I could explore that. It left me stunned. I made it clear that I didn't find Lily attractive, she just happened to be better looking than most of Ellie's other friends. I know it sounds shallow, but it was all part of the game. Ellie kept insisting for the next few days that I should have a casual encounter with Lily. She believed that if I had even the slightest attraction to her, it was better to satisfy it openly rather than cheat behind her back. I told her I had no intention of sleeping with Lily and that I had never seen her that way, but she didn't seem to believe me. A few days later, we were at a house party at Lily and Joshua's place with just the 4 of us, my wife, Joshua, Lily, and I. We got a bit bored with the games, so we decided to watch a movie. I don't know whose idea it was to watch 2+2, but that's what we ended up watching. For those who haven't seen it, it's about couples swapping partners to add excitement to their relationships. After the movie and a bit of alcohol, we all looked at each other, wondering if we should do something similar. Thankfully, nothing happened, and we all burst into laughter. I almost forgot about that incident once Monday came around, but my wife didn't feel the same way. A few days into the week, while we were having a casual dinner table conversation, she brought up our experience from that night. She hinted that trying couple swapping might be exciting. I chuckled, thinking she was joking. My laughter turned to shock when she said she was serious. I asked if she had someone specific in mind for a couple swap, and she mentioned Joshua and Lily. I looked at her in disbelief and told her she couldn't be serious about this. I declined the idea, explaining that it would harm both our families. She nodded and admitted she wasn't that serious either, but the movie had sparked the idea, and she thought it would pass. I acknowledged it and moved on. However, as time went on, she continued to suggest we spice up our marriage. It's understandable that after 7 years together, the excitement in a relationship can dwindle, but that's part of marriage. You trade thrill for deeper feelings like stability, love, and care. I straightforwardly asked her if she was open to the idea of having a non-exclusive relationship. She flatly declined, stating that she suggested it only to strengthen our connection and nothing more. I reassured her of my love and my desire to be only with her. Time passed, but Ellie remained firm in her stance. She constantly dropped subtle hints that I should have closeness with Lily. One evening, Ellie returned from the gym with excitement. She revealed that she had talked to Lily about my interest. To my surprise, Lily and Joshua were also considering exploring their own bed life. I was taken aback. I inquired why she had discussed this with Lily. She explained that it was common for women to talk about such matters with their friends. Personally, I'm more old-fashioned. I wouldn't discuss such things with my male friends. While I might have mentioned it casually in the past, I had never gone into detail, especially regarding my wife. She went on to tell Lily that I found her attractive, and to my amusement, Lily blushed. Ellie seemed quite pleased with herself. I shrugged it off, saying it's normal for anyone to blush when they learn someone finds them attractive. But Ellie suggested that perhaps Lily was also interested in being close with me. To be honest, given how persistent she was, I had a feeling that something was up. So, I decided to investigate her phone. I checked her messages and social media accounts, but everything looked clean, except for some spam messages from an unknown person. I couldn't help but feel guilty for doubting Ellie. She is known for her cheerful and candid personality. She never holds back, and that's one of the things I love about her. I had been treating her poorly ever since she started pushing me to have closeness with Lily. After confirming that her phone was clean, I couldn't help but despise myself for being unkind to her. I thought she loved me so much that she was willing to let me be with someone else. I felt truly fortunate. Over the following month, we regularly hung out with Joshua and Lily, whether for drinks, dinner, or gatherings at our homes and elsewhere. It was all pretty standard. However, something unusual was happening. I found myself developing a strong attraction to Lily, and there were several reasons for that. Whenever we were together, Ellie would playfully tease me, and sometimes Joshua joined in on the teasing, while Lily blushed and maintained intense eye contact. Honestly, who wouldn't feel a bit fluttery in such a situation? But every time this topic came up, I made it crystal clear that I had no intention of getting involved with Lily. Literally, I'm writing this because I find myself in a challenging situation. We have a long weekend coming up next week due to a Friday bank holiday. My wife and Lily had already made plans for all of us to have a short getaway at a beach resort. We've taken similar trips with Joshua and Lily before, but this time feels different. My wife, Ellie, is insisting that I have closeness with Lily during this vacation. I firmly declined, but she argues that we can always back off if things become uncomfortable. I asked Ellie what would happen if she feels hurt or possessive about it, and she responded that we won't truly understand ourselves until we give it a try. I'm feeling conflicted. I'd be dishonest if I said I wasn't intrigued, but I'm equally anxious. I'm worried that this could harm our marriage, but my wife believes it will strengthen our bond. She claims it's more common than I realize, even though people rarely discuss it openly. I'm unsure about how this whole thing works, so I'm seeking advice from individuals who have ventured into this territory and their experiences. Is it truly a good idea to involve a third person to spice up our relationship? Folks, guess what? You were absolutely right, she was indeed cheating on me. I made a decision to go along with it and see where it would lead. Now, I definitely didn't want to have closeness with Lily, but I put on a facade in front of Ellie, pretending I was open to giving it a shot. I wanted to find out what would happen once I agreed. Ellie was overjoyed that I had finally said yes. On the planned weekend, all four of us drove to a resort that was about 60 miles away. During the journey, while Ellie and Joshua were enjoying the beautiful scenery, I couldn't help but notice that Lily seemed distant and nervous for most of the trip. I wasn't feeling great either, but I was doing my best to pretend otherwise. I didn't have any concrete proof of wrongdoing, it was just a gut feeling. We arrived at the resort on Friday afternoon. The plan was to soak up the sun until evening, attend a party organized by the resort, and later explore our most desires. In short, everything was set up for Lily and me to get together. After freshening up, we had a sumptuous lunch and spent the rest of the afternoon lounging in the sun. I tried to have a private conversation with Lily, but she didn't acknowledge any discomfort. Instead, she smirked and said she was looking forward to the night. The party got pretty wild, but I made an effort to stay composed, anticipating the next step. Sensing my unease and alertness, Joshua reassured me, claiming everything was fine and that Lily just wanted to have a good time with me. She was attracted to my physique. Now that I know the truth, I'm disgusted by his actions. I had no idea what time it was when we left the party, and suddenly I found myself in a room with Lily. We both sat there feeling awkward, and I couldn't tell how much time passed. She finally broke the silence and asked how we should proceed. I questioned whether we really needed to do this. She gave me a puzzled look. I then asked if she genuinely wanted to be close with me. She confessed to having a small crush on me but had never thought about being close until her husband Joshua put the idea in her head. I sensed something was off, so I asked her if she truly desired to be with me. To my astonishment, I discovered that she had been manipulated in a similar way as I had been. It all began with Ellie sharing the game where I rated Lily the highest. Ellie also mentioned to Lily that we were looking for ways to add excitement to our marriage. On the same day, Joshua came home and expressed how lucky he felt to have such an attractive wife that even I desired. Lily believed I had told Joshua about all of this, but it wasn't me. It was, in fact, Ellie who had spilled the beans, or perhaps it was their plan all along. Since then, Joshua had been implanting this idea in Lily's mind. He asked her if she would be interested in having closeness with me. She refused multiple times. But he insisted that it would spice up and strengthen their relationship. Lily admitted she found my physique appealing but not to the extent of wanting to have closeness. I made it clear that I never had any intention of it. I shared my side of the story, and she was shocked because all she knew until then was that I desired her. At that point, We both realized it was a scheme orchestrated by them. Lily confronted Joshua, asking if he and Ellie planned to do something similar. He denied it, stating he wanted Lily to experience it first, and if things went well, he'd consider it. I distinctly remember not talking to Ellie because I had no desire to be part of this game. I told her I suspected Ellie of cheating when she pushed for the hookup and checked her phone, but it was clean. We decided it was time to find out the truth. I wanted to confront them right away, but Lily insisted on catching them in the act to expose them. So, on the night of our supposed hookup, we planned to catch Ellie and Joshua outside. We knew they wouldn't risk anything at that point because we could back out and leave. When we went outside, we found them watching something on an iPad. They were sitting close. We told them we changed our minds and didn't want to go through with it. They looked disappointed and asked why. I explained it didn't feel right, and they couldn't come up with much to say. I also said I had a sudden client meeting the next day, so we had to leave early. I suggested Ellie continue the vacation with Lily and Joshua, but none of them wanted to stay longer. We drove home the next morning. The four of us remained mostly silent on the way back home. Once we arrived, I changed and then left the house. I decided to drive to a coffee shop a bit farther away. About an hour after I left, Lily called to inform me that Joshua had also left the house, citing some urgent work. We both knew what that urgent work entailed. Lily mentioned that she had asked another friend to tail Joshua and would keep me posted on their whereabouts. Expectedly, they were found at my house before I left. I had told Lily I'd return home late in the evening, and they couldn't let this opportunity slip by. I hurriedly drove back to pick up Lily, my anger mounting as I headed home with the intention of catching them in the act. I used my key to unlock the apartment, and there they were, lying without clothes. Lily quickly took photos of them while they struggled to cover themselves up. Without hesitation, I stormed into the room, tossed Ellie's belongings outside the apartment, and demanded that she leave immediately. They both pleaded with us to hear them out. Joshua kept insisting that they were merely experimenting, similar to what we had done the previous night. I grabbed Joshua by the collar and confronted him, demanding to know when he started sleeping with my wife. Ellie tried to intervene, but I pushed her away. He claimed it was their first time exploring this sort of relationship. My anger intensified, and I tightened my grip on him, grinding my teeth as I pressed for a confession. I fixed Ellie with a furious gaze and told her I didn't mind going to jail for dealing with this parasite. I made it clear that either one of them confessed the truth, or I would deal with Joshua myself. Ellie, sobbing, eventually agreed and pleaded with me to stop. They finally confessed that they had been having an affair for over a year, although they had been spotted together by a couple of my friends and one of Lily. Luckily for them, none had informed us. However, Joshua and Ellie lived in fear of being exposed eventually, so they devised a plan to involve us in a couples swap and legitimize their cheating. I asked her how come her phone was clean when I checked it. She sobbed and admitted that they used to communicate only through emails, which she used to sign and only when required. They didn't chat often and used that email to communicate regarding the time and location of their meetup. It was just a cold, physical relationship between Ellie and Joshua. Lily left the house after hearing everything. Joshua followed her. I asked Ellie to leave the house immediately. She tried to hug me, sobbing and pleading with me. I made it clear that reconciliation is not on the table. She tried to fool me. I couldn't let her run over me. She only left our house when I threatened to involve her parents. I messaged Lily, asking her to send me the pictures she had taken of Ellie and Joshua. I forwarded those photos to Ellie's sister and explained everything to her. Ellie's sister confirmed that Ellie hadn't gone to her parents' house. After about a week, I emailed Ellie the divorce papers since I didn't know her current location. I had the lawyer send the physical copy to her parents' house. They called me in a state of panic. I included Ellie's sister on the call and asked her to share all the details. Following the email with the divorce papers, Ellie began sending me pleas. She had previously sent messages seeking reconciliation, but the frequency of her messages increased after receiving the email. Meanwhile, Lily decided to involve her parents in the situation. Lily's parents were shocked and disappointed to learn about the whole affair. They apologized to me and assured me that they would counsel Lily. I decided to cut off all communication with Ellie and focused on moving forward. The divorce process was challenging, but eventually, it was finalized, and I started rebuilding my life. I am grateful for the support of friends, especially Lily, who stood by me during this difficult time. I've learned valuable lessons about trust, communication, and the importance of setting boundaries in a relationship. Father was a businessman, and Joshua managed one of his business units. So when the truth came out, Joshua lost his job, and Lily's father used his connections to hinder Joshua's prospects in his field. It's been a month since the day everything came to light. My divorce proceedings are ongoing, with Ellie contesting it and demanding a share of my house. I'm deeply hurt by the betrayal and the way they attempted to drag us into their deceitful game. I'll provide updates if there are any further developments, but if not, consider this the final update. I know some of you might have expected Lily and me to get together, but that didn't happen. As I mentioned earlier, neither Lily nor I wanted that hookup. We were both manipulated into it, but thankfully, we managed to escape at the last moment. My divorce has been settled, and Ellie didn't get a dime. My lawyer argued that if she claimed a share of the property, we would also revisit the divorce terms and ask for alimony due to the emotional distress. Let me tell you, if you pay your lawyers well, they can negotiate for some pretty favorable outcomes. She eventually gave up and signed the papers. I can't recall if I mentioned this before, but Joshua was working at his father-in-law's company, and with these revelations, he was shown the door. He struggled to find a decent-paying job in his field. After leaving my house, Ellie rented a rather shabby apartment and offered Joshua to stay with her, but he declined, fearing further repercussions from his father-in-law and admitting he never loved her. Ellie had been living under the illusion that Joshua loved her, but that wasn't the case. Joshua made it clear that it was all for fun with no emotional attachment, just as they had initially agreed. These revelations came to light during Lily's divorce proceedings, where Joshua confessed that he had been manipulated by Ellie, and his true affections lay with Lily. He pleaded with Lily and her father for another chance, but they rebuffed him and insisted on the divorce. I must admit, seeing my ex-wife exposed and humiliated in court didn't hurt one bit. It felt like justice served hot, just as she deserved. She was abandoned by everyone she knew, her husband, her lover, her friend, and her family. Her parents and siblings turned their backs on her. I'm not sure about her current job status, but news like this tends to spread like wildfire. I briefly considered sharing those incriminating photos with some of her colleagues, but I decided against it. As for her current situation, I can't say for sure, but I doubt she can maintain her previous lifestyle on her current income. She risked our stable relationship for a fleeting thrill and ended up getting what she deserved. I've started counseling to help me cope. I was grappling with disturbing thoughts about the night Ellie had planned for my hookup. Therapy is slowly helping me move forward, but I think it will take some more time to completely rid myself of her memory. My friends suggest I should start meeting other women, but I don't think I'm quite ready to dive into the dating scene just yet. That was our second story in this video. Let's listen to our next story, which will be no less interesting. I'm not proud of my actions, and I do believe that karma will catch up with me someday. It's embarrassing for someone like me who's somewhat successful to admit to such petty behavior. I'm 26 years old. I had an amazing friend of 2 years who eventually asked me out, and we started dating. Let's call him Jaden. We connected on a deep emotional level, and there was something about him that made me fall in love. We maintained a long-distance relationship for a year, and it felt incredibly serious to me. Jaden is the type of guy who just goes with the flow of life, some might call it laid back. It became routine for me to assist him financially, and I did it willingly. I covered his mechanic bills once and bought groceries for his family several times because they were going through a tough time. He always appeared to live without a care in the world. I playfully asked him once, "What would you do if I didn't pay for your food?" He'd respond, "Eat less or maybe nothing at all," while shrugging. Despite living 3 hours apart, everything seemed fine, and we visited each other frequently. But then things took a turn. I learned from his sister that he had been communicating with other women while we were in a relationship. I confronted him, but Jaden denied it and refused to take responsibility. He claimed that I was the only one on his mind and that his sister didn't know what she was talking about. I believed him because of my love for him. However, 3 weeks ago, a mutual friend revealed that he had been seeing another woman in his town and having closeness with her. When I confronted him about this, he shifted the blame to me, saying, "You know it's hard for me to control myself, and you've been neglecting me. You should understand that the distance is tough on me." This wasn't accurate. During our time apart, I visited him every other weekend when I could afford it, and we communicated daily. He also accused me of not wanting him to live with me, which was true, to be honest. My reason was that I didn't want to support a grown man and pay his bills. I felt devastated, especially when Jaden, my partner, told me he loved me and was willing to do anything to make our relationship work, only to completely cut off contact the very next day. I confided in my friends, and they informed me that the girl he had gotten involved with was just an easygoing woman who had been around town for a while. To be honest, this hurt me even more. Let's call her Destiny, it seems quite fitting. They also revealed that he had started seeing her the day after our conversation, maybe even before. I stood by Jaden during his toughest moments, the lowest point in his life, only for him to cheat on me with the least reputable woman in town, repeatedly lie about it, and give me false hope like I'm a gullible fool. Then he vanished without explanation after seeking cheap thrills. During that time, I had to go through the humiliation of scheduling a gynecologist appointment for an STD check. Why should I blame myself? I didn't betray anyone. 2 weeks ago, while still dealing with my heartbreak, I reactivated my Facebook account and spent hours browsing through profiles of my ex and his new love interest. Deep down, I knew it wasn't healthy, but I couldn't resist. Instead of focusing on their flirtatious messages, I fixated on her profile. I scrolled through months of cringeworthy selfies taken in a grimy, dimly lit bathroom with barely any clothing, the kind even someone with loose morals might feel embarrassed about. Then I did something I'm not proud of. Please don't judge me, I was in a bad place. I created a fake profile of an attractive man who used to attend her school. I quickly befriended her friends, posted fake updates, and added her as a friend. All of this happened in less than a day. It's surprising how many people will accept friend requests on Facebook based solely on your appearance, whether they actually know you or not. In just 2 hours, I had 40 friends, and friend requests kept pouring in every few minutes. I couldn't help but wonder who was more pitiful, me or these people who were so easily deceived. The following day, I began chatting with her, and she was remarkably candid, even sending me photos of herself in rather revealing attire, all to a total stranger and without receiving anything in return. It made me wonder why many men didn't see this as a red flag. As a woman myself, I found it quite effortless to tell her what she wanted to hear. 2 or 3 days later, Destiny was already venting to me about her relationship problems with Jaden. Yes, you read that correctly. I suggested meeting up to show her what it's like to be with a real man. At this point, I had saved hours of conversations, including the dirtiest innuendos I had ever come across, along with pictures, voice messages, and so on. It was time. Meanwhile, as all of this unfolded, Jaden began reaching out to me, admitting that his actions were a mistake. I inquired if they had broken up, and he falsely claimed they had not, once but twice when they hadn't. Strangely, this should have shattered my heart, but it didn't. I knew the truth but reassured him that I still loved him, was willing to forgive and forget, and even wanted him to move in with me. He sounded thrilled, declared his intention to give his 2 weeks' notice at work, and even texted me later that day saying he had abruptly left his job without notice because he felt they weren't worth it. He mentioned he would pack his things and head over later in the week. I'm aware that karma will catch up with me, but this was my way of getting revenge. I posted all of our conversations on the fake profile, tagged her in it, and shared the pictures and videos exclusively for my ecstasy. Then I watched the drama unfold before deactivating the fake account. I received 53 likes and 82 messages. Her social circle, friends, and family all witnessed it. Jaden saw it too and coincidentally immediately messaged me, saying, "Hey babe, just wanted to say that I miss you so much. Can't wait to be with you again. Miss you," without mentioning anything about the other girl. Little did he know that I was more informed than he realized. Friday comes around, and he informs me that he's heading to my apartment. It's worth mentioning that I recently moved, so when Jaden was en route, he didn't know my new address. So, I suggest we meet at a nearby CVS where I can guide him to my place. Classic Jaden, he responds with, "Sure, but I'm running low on gas. Can you fill up my tank?" Don't forget your credit card. I, in my forgiving nature, agree and tell him I'll do it once he arrives. Soon, I receive a text saying he's at the CVS and asks for my whereabouts. I deliberately ignore it. 30 minutes later, he starts blowing up my phone like an aggressive telemarketer from an overseas call center. I ignore his calls. I admit I was a bit petty, letting it ring once so he knows I'm sending it to voicemail. An hour passes, and he calls, leaving a voicemail expressing concern. Hey babe, I'm worried about you. Are you okay? I was more. Then instead of then. 2 hours later, he informs me that he's stranded. He drove to another CVS, thinking I was there, ran out of gas, and is now stuck at a gas station with all his stuff in the car. I still ignore his calls. I think it's the perfect time to get some sleep, but my excitement keeps me awake. So, I take an Ambien and hit the hay. Saturday morning, it looks like a phone apocalypse occurred as I see my phone with 37 text messages, 28 missed calls, and 7 voicemails, all from one person. Guess who? Unfortunately, I can't share the voicemails, but I can say that eventually, Jaden had to call his mom to come get him. After that, I blocked his number and had to change mine because he began calling me from his family's phone. Despite all the blocked calls, I received a message from his sister, the same one who told me about his affair. She was eager to update me on the aftermath. She revealed that their mom and Jaden returned home with Jaden sobbing his heart out while their mom was furious. Interestingly, their mom wasn't mad because of his cheating. She was livid with me for what I did to her snotty kid. His sister made sure to reassure me, saying I was strong and deserved someone better than her deceitful, unfaithful brother. I acknowledge that I acted impulsively throughout this entire ordeal, likely tarnishing this girl's reputation within her social circle. I'm considering reactivating the fake profile to apologize or something, but I'm undecided. It's worth noting that she knowingly engaged in a relationship with a man who had a girlfriend, even seducing him, and then cheated on him as well. I'd appreciate your thoughts on this. She's unaware that it was me, just a random guy who exposed her actions. I made a conscious effort not to share the pictures, only showing them to my ex. Although he knows it's her, nobody has connected the dots, and I ensured it stays that way. I was cautious throughout this process. I lost him, yes, but I have no desire to get him back. It might sound crazy, but I still have lingering feelings for Jaden, my ex. He'll never forgive me now that he's jobless, and the whole town knows his business. A small part of me regrets everything and wishes for a reconciliation, but a larger part of me is relieved that I've put an end to any chance of that happening, as it wouldn't have worked out in the long run. It feels liberating to get all of this off my chest. Thank you. What do you think of our stories today? In my opinion, the most interesting of all these stories was the second one. I don't know why, but I was hooked by something. Which story did you like the most? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.